I'm here with Mary Sumilov, founder of the Radiant Woman program, to talk about why gender work is important and how it relates to our everyday lives. So, Maria, why is gender work or women's work important in general, and what are we missing out on if we don't do this work?
Great question. Firstly, obviously, it's really important to acknowledge that there's an awful lot of different gender work companies out there, so there isn't necessarily a standard for this type of work. But what we do with the Radiant Woman program is we basically teach women to learn about the hidden layers of their brilliance, the hidden layers that are underneath there that they don't necessarily have access to yet. And we begin to understand who we are. And if we don't do this type of work, we tend to miss out on living our lives, the lives that are true for us. But obviously the gender work covers many different aspects of every woman because we are working on those different layers. And some of the topics that we do work with are things like body issues. So how, and not even necessarily issues, how do our bodies reflect the things or the being that we are? Sometimes things like cellular memory is very important. Our bodies reflect who we are. And we also learn about things like our psyche, our psychology, how what drives us to do the things that we do on a day-to-day life, what our patterns might be, and things like what is it actually that our soul needs, what do we need on a soul level that is so important for us, that we feel that we have fulfilled, if you like, our purpose for this life. But the main thing that is really good to remember about gender work and women's work in particular is that men and women are different. 80% of women have a feminine sexual essence, and just as 80% of men have a masculine sexual essence. This means that not everybody, of course, because everybody is their own individual and everybody is different and special, but in very gross terms and in very general terms, men and women are different, and we need to stop pretending that we're not.
That brings up a lot of questions. Would you mind going into a bit more detail on what you mean by the physical level of the work, like, the different layers, explain that, and how you would work on people at a physical level, especially when the majority of your work is online.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, if I can give you a couple of examples, that might be probably the best thing. Firstly, it's really good to acknowledge that in order for us to learn anything about ourselves or anything else, we need to have a concept to put that learning into. And the easiest way to learn things are firstly to understand what you're learning and put that into a concept to show how it relates to other things. So just bear with me, I just wanted to clarify that. But if I can give you an example of the difference between men and women on a physiological level, that is certainly something that we'll be covering with this work. Brain structure. For example, men generally have 9% larger brain. The size of the brain. Yes, but they don't have any more brain cells than women. Women are just a lot more, intense and concentrated. So that's certainly one thing. But also there's a part of the brain called corpus callosum, which basically allows information be passed between the left and right hemisphere of the brain, which in women, generally speaking, is more well defined and more it's faster. The highway of the passing of the messages between the hemispheres is faster. We tend to be able to go from left brain to right brain and back again a lot faster than men do. And this on a practical level means that we are able to handle emotions better. We're able to talk about emotions more easier. I'm sure everybody out there knows an example of feeling frustration about why don't men talk about their feelings.
Yes, obvious differences.
Yeah. So women have this, and that same brain structure allows or even drives women to build communities more, to have communities around them, to have more communication, to have more interaction with other people, whereas men tend to be a lot less dependent on that kind of a thing. Men tend to be, direct line thinking, sometimes even tunnel vision, but the perfect thing about that approach to life is that they have a very high level of focus. So it's quite amazing, and it's really important to celebrate the differences that we have rather than make them into something that is a problem, because really it's not a problem. Why wouldn't we make the most out of our differences? The other thing is that is very obvious is the hormonal differences between men and women. So on a physiological level, we're talking about different hormones carrying us through different times of life. If you look at young males, when they're in their kind of teenage years, the testosterone really begins, to kind of surge and take over, and they tend to get a little bit more assertive and aggressive even, and sexually active and so on. The same thing for women. We get a cycle of hormones which allows us to reproduce and which allows us to carry a child, to carry another life within us. And what happens with the cycle is that because our worldview is dependent on the amount of hormones that are being secreted in our body, our worldview as women changes depending on the time of the month, which is actually not a bad thing. It's often considered to be a bad thing, and it's often, they're hormonal and all this kind of thing, but it's actually not like that. It's more, it gives the women the ability to see the same thing from different points of view.
Yes.
So it allows us a lot more flexibility in looking at things and understanding things, and we're not so stuck in this is the way it should be, because this is how we feel all of the time, the whole month. We change, which then changes our worldview. Literally, every single day our worldview is redefined, and then it changes again. And we actually, because of our hormonal cycle, we as women have the ability to reevaluate all of our beliefs once a month. Which is pretty cool. Unlike men, who are very much, for men change tends to come more slowly, because they don't have the opportunity to have all their stuff in their face once a month. They don't have to look at their stuff every month of their lives from puberty on. So I feel that's one of the unharnessed powers that women have. I feel that there's too much emphasis on the destruction or the destructive or the negative sides of that particular power, but actually it's not. I don't see it that way. That's not the whole story at all. And I really, this program really endorses women to see themselves as more whole, and to see that what might seem like a hindrance to the outside world is actually a great well of strength that you can just dip into and drink from.
Well, that's interesting, because you've answered the question I was just about to ask about, it is always, that, being premenstrual and, the she-devil coming out and, that's always had such a negative connotation in modern society.
Yeah.
And, how that gets dealt with and how we get around that. How does that get celebrated?
And how does it how it doesn't get dealt with and how it doesn't get celebrated, more to the point, because this is something that is not acceptable socially in the Western world. Whereas in other cultures there are places where women go for the duration of their menstruation, where other women just look after them and embrace them and offer this support, not because they think that the woman is weaker or anything like that, but to celebrate the menstruation. So we as a Western society have a lot to learn about respecting women, and I'm not talking about like feminism point of view. I'm talking about we are people, exactly like men are people, who need to be respected for who they are.
Yes.
But, this is another day's workshop. This is certainly something that we will be covering in a lot of our programs, because it's so essential to understand what drives us. What's there that's really like, what is who I am? Who am I, and what is that? And how does that relate to the rest of the world?
So is that where the cellular memory comes in that you were talking about? Can you explain that a bit further?
Sure. So the cellular memory is basically more about very emotional events in our lives, be it traumatic or be it extremely elating. The easiest way to relate to what cellular memory looks like on a physical level is when you get a visceral reaction to something. It might be a thought, it might be a smell, it might be an occurrence, it might be like, I'll just give you a simple example. When you were a child, you were at the train tracks, and when you were at the train tracks, your feet got run over by a train. So when the train was coming, you didn't move you didn't move your feet. So now from then on, you have cellular trauma in your cellular memory. So every cell in your body holds memory, stores memory. So it's not just the brain, which is what we think that it is. It's every cell of our body. So we keep getting physiological or visceral reactions to memories. And so, for example, from then on, anytime you heard a train, you'd get a visceral reaction to try and run. Because, you're now associating that the train will hurt your feet, or the train will not make you in pain and not be able to move or run away from it. So things like that. So people who have had, for example, sexual abuse or physiological abuse as a child tend to hold memory in different parts of their bodies, and that memory can be triggered at any given moment by anything really that you associate to that time of abuse.
Yeah.
So it can be smell of alcohol.
Yeah.
It can be smell of cigarettes. It can be a terry cloth, the feeling of terry cloth. It can be, and you don't want, when people are taking their belt off, you don't want to be in that presence. So it could be anything. And really, it's important to know what we are carrying in our bodies, because our cellular memory, especially the trauma, restricts our physiological body movement, range of motion, flexibility, all that stuff that we think that should deteriorate as we get older. But it's not actually true. What is deteriorating our bodies when we're getting older is, yes, to a minute extent, the age, but more to the point, the amount of cellular trauma that we carry with us throughout our lives.
Yeah. So you're not are you only talking about, those major things like post-traumatic stress, or are you also including, day-to-day things, I don't know.
For example, suppression of voice, if you feel like your voice isn't heard. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, or, things, you continually got in trouble as a kid,
Yeah.
or you found yourself in a certain situation that wasn't necessarily traumatic or abuse, but there's certain things that seem to keep cropping up.
Well, we are very... Abuse is kind of a double-edged sword, because everything that does not celebrate who we are is a form of abuse. Right? However, the current society has learned to call everything abuse so that they can make something out of it rather than take responsibility of their own feelings. So, for example, somebody might, be in a relationship where they're actually being passive aggressive towards their partner, and the partner reacts and raises their voice, and now the passive aggressive person is saying that the other person is abusing them, which is actually the opposite. The passive aggressive person was originally abusing the other person, which then especially with the passive aggressive pattern, I know this is kind of going off a little bit, but this is such a normal dynamic that people play out in, especially in relationships. You have one person that's extremely passive aggressive, and it's actually often the woman, because there's, for various reasons, I'm not going to get into that right now because we have a limited time, but the passive aggressive person basically calls their partner abusive because the passive-aggressive person, by being passive-aggressive, has drawn the abuse from that other person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not as, like, abuse is very much a double-edged sword, and it's, yes, everything that is not right for your soul is abuse, but not everything that doesn't feed your ego is abuse.
Oh,
so
sounds like a lot of information.
Oh yeah, we're just scratching the surface here.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
It's a lot, and yeah, this is being my life's work. It's certainly something that I love talking about. However, it can be very confrontational for most people.
So it's pretty thorough what you do then.
Thorough, and it induces people taking personal responsibility of their lives and where they're going with them. Yeah, and it's very thorough because we're working on many different levels. Part of my personality type is that I am very good at feeling how the other person is feeling and translate those feelings back to them. So basically mirror what they're going through and validate them in that process and so on. But the problem also is that I need to, as a facilitator, I need to, in subtle and not so subtle ways, manipulate that person on many different levels to get the results for them that they want for themselves. So, because of my own personal wounds from my childhood, I learned at a very early age to manipulate people to get what I wanted. Whereas now I very deliberately, as my life's work, manipulate people for them to get what they want in life. And that is that happens on so many different levels than just talking about it. I mean, talking about your feelings and feeling your feelings are two entirely different things.
Yeah, so that's sort of, would you call that sort of the psychological part of it, or
psychological
how does
is
that come into?
Well, psychological is conscious as well as subconscious work, but because of my ability to manipulate people, and I don't apologize for that because it brings people results, so it is what it is. I'm very open about the fact that I do manipulate people for a living to get what they to get them what they want in life, but in order for the person to be at the most receptive space, I need to manipulate first. I need to manipulate them to first be open. And even people who are resistant, I still can subconsciously manipulate, so I can manipulate them, their subconscious, to be open. So I can just put the new beliefs and start breaking down the cellular memory through the back door, effectively. It sounds it sounds a bit
It's big.
yeah. And this is one of the reasons why when I run workshops, for example, I don't have many people in the workshops, because it's way too demanding on me, because I have to relate to everybody on a level of how they're feeling, and then know how to manipulate them the most effectively for them to get what they want in life. So yeah, we're only scratching the surface here, but yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so, and you keep talking about personality types.
Yep.
How, being individual, or, getting results individually.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a bit
Sure.
more?
So in terms of doing the psychological work, we need to identify your personality type. So there are various different ways that you can do online questionnaires to determine what type of personality you are, to get an indicator, personality type indicator. There are great ones like the Enneagram, the Myers-Briggs, and so on. So anybody can just go and do that. But then we take that personality type identification further, because that actually gives me the blueprint to know how to manipulate that person most effectively. Sounds callous, but actually that's what brings results. So, and people need to have results. I don't want to do this work if it's not giving results to people. But your personality type then allows you to start exploring your strengths as a person. Also your so-called weaknesses. I don't really call them weaknesses, because underneath your greatest wounds and the indications of your weaknesses are your greatest gifts to the world. So it is extremely important that weaknesses are not labeled as weaknesses and that's it. They are challenges that we need to begin to shed some light on, so that we have more and more and deeper of an understanding of ourselves and what we're about. And obviously then, with the personality type, you will learn to know about whether you're introverted, whether you're naturally extroverted, and what your patterns might be, what your wounds are, and how those wounds translate into patterns that actually then run your life. So it's a bit of like the psychological side of this work is a lot of information to take in, whereas the physiological side of things are more about feeling into your body and seeing how you're feeling, and realizing when you're being triggered, which might give you a visceral reaction and so on. Whereas the psychological side of things are very much about understanding your own psychology and what to do with it, and then we take that and we transfer that psychology into your body and start looking at that body psychology connection.
That's really interesting. I hadn't really considered the difference between introverted and extroverted, so it's sort of not a one size fits all by the sound thing. So how would you approach, or what's the difference between introverted and extroverted people?
Well, introverted people tend to be very uncomfortable in social situations. Not always, but most of the time. Introverts don't tend to need other people in their presence, and in fact, introverts tend to need a lot of personal space. Extroverts, on the other hand, tend to run on external validation more. Extroverts need to have social situations in their lives where they can relate to other people and they can reflect on themselves through other people, whereas introverts reflect on themselves through themselves. So they go into what's called introspection, which is just going into your own space and really feeling into how you're feeling and looking at your own stuff. Extroverts tend to be easily distracted. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of the world's most brilliant people are extroverts. Look at Richard Branson and all the various different business adventures that he's certainly been successful in. So this is not one is better than the other, because oftentimes then a lot of introverts don't actually ask for help when they should be asking for help. They just keep going more and more in and detach themselves from the world. So there are different aspects to either one of those types of personalities. And when you know if you're an introverted or an extroverted person, then you can embrace the qualities that you have, as well as begin to condition yourself into a little bit to the different direction. So you can start strengthening your areas of challenge. So if you're an introvert, you can go like, okay, how can I actually become a little bit more introverted? Not because I should, but because I might find great joyous moments in those moments of extroversion. So how can I kind of start moving into that direction with my own parameters and in my own speed? Because it has to be, you have, especially as an introvert, you have to feel safe in order to do those things.
Right, so it's about learning the aspects of the personality type to get a better understanding of oneself.
Absolutely. This is what this program, any work, any gender work should be about. You, not what I want to make you. Any gender work, any women's work should be about nurturing those parts of you that we need to put, that the world will benefit from. Nurturing you as you are, not who you should be.
Not I should be making cups of tea and coffee for my husband when he walks home.
No, you might choose to do that, but...
Or there's something wrong with me if I'm not doing that sort of...
Yeah, no. There's nothing wrong with you, but you may want to change some things about yourself that you're not happy about.
And so does that... is that where the patterns come? Yeah, that you mentioned something about patterns, behaviour patterns. Is that where that comes in?
Yeah.
And in relation to personality types?
Yes, so patterns do relate to personality types because your personality type is basically determined by your experiences in your imprint period, which is 3 to 7 years of age. So your personality type develops in that time period. And after that, you have adopted the patterns that are going to run your life for the rest of your life, unless you begin to shed light to those patterns.
So we're going back that far?
Yep.
Holy dude.
So then, if most people start this work in their 30s and 40s, at which point most people are actually ready to look at their stuff and really feel their feelings and so on, you already have about 30 or 40 years of momentum to support those patterns, which makes those can make those patterns a little bit more challenging to break. But there are certainly ways of shifting those patterns. And what gender work, in my opinion, or especially women's work, should do is allow women to learn a different way of looking at their experiences and see the gifts that are in their lives already. It is not to make you wrong in any way. There's nothing wrong with you. So what if you've had a passive-aggressive pattern for 30 years? Today's a new day. Just now is a new moment. You can choose something different. And any gender work or any empowerment work should give you the tools to reassess and choose something that is actually more suitable for you at any given moment.
So it comes back to that self-awareness, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, how am I feeling right now, and what do I need right now? If you don't learn anything else about yourself ever, please learn those two questions. How am I feeling right now, and what do I need right now? And then try to give that to yourself, because that will begin to bring you to the journey of or onto your own path, the path that is right for you. and you'll be living truly as yourself, and people can say, but that's really selfish, then you become really, you're only doing what's right for you. But actually, if you look at the world as a very unfair place, yes, that is absolutely true. But if you can look at the world as a place that if people were more happy, they would treat you better. It's true, because if you do what is genuinely right for you, you are happier, and you are a better provider, and you are a better friend, and you are a better, girlfriend. And this is not better by anybody else's standards. This is where you are feeling happy, and the things that you're doing, you're productive in the areas of your life that you want to be productive, be it family, work, whatever.
So the different personality types, do they deal with things similarly or differently, or are they, can you put the same personality types in together, or is it purely individual?
Well, you can certainly group people and have things that those people have in common. But because not two people on the planet have had exactly the same experiences growing up, they can't know exactly how the other person is doing. And you don't have two exactly the same experiences. So everybody is different, but there are similarities that then put us into different groups of personality types.
So
and of course the severity of your experiences also determines to what extent you have a specific pattern, or to what extent you respond or react to your, being reactive or being triggered into a negative thing, negative like momentum. So really depending on the severity of your experiences, it translates into the severity of your reaction, or the stubbornness of your pattern.
So even though it's got categories to explain and educate people, it's still very individual.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
By the sound of it.
Absolutely. Our personality type makes us somewhat predictable, if you are familiar with the personality types. So you can predict what that person might do, but you won't always know. And that's where, from my point of view, the work is easy, because I can feel how they're feeling as well as anticipate how they're going to feel about any given thing. But that's only like a 1% of the world's population that's able to do that, to be able to go into that level of feeling of the other person's feelings.
So then, where you mentioned the person's soul before, how does that come into what you're saying about personality types and issues and things?
So depending on what our experiences in life has been so far, that gives us certain yearnings and certain hopes that we seek to fulfill throughout our lifetime. Now those hopes might be something like, I wish somebody would just come and save me, which actually is a very juvenile way of looking at things, which then reflects on the fact that we don't trust ourselves. We need somebody else to come and save us. So now we can start working on trusting ourselves. Does that make sense? And and things like our soul stores the essence of who we are effectively, and even our wounds. We think that our wounds define us as a person. We think our soul is defined by our wounds, but in fact our soul is not necessarily defined by our wounds. We can absolutely go down that road if we want to. But going even deeper is underneath those wounds are our greatest gifts to the world. and our soul contains our greatest gifts to the world, but yes, you need to go through the wounds and look at those wounds in order to get to those greatest gifts. It's actually quite beautiful. It's quite heartbreaking when people are going into those wounds, but who they discover underneath those wounds is just so beautiful and gets me every time. I'm a little bit, emotional right now.
It sounds like a lot of really hard work on behalf of the person to deal with that, especially in a society where there's almost a sense that we shouldn't show those deep feelings, or that we should push them down and we should get over things, or
it is really hard to start with, and that's why you need to have an environment that supports your journey, not supports you to be who other people want you to be. And when I started doing this work, I realized really early on that this is what especially women need, a community. And it is one of parts of my vision for the Radiant Woman work all over the world, that we have those support networks who support us to be who we are, not who somebody else needs us to be. And because it is really hard in the beginning, you are deliberately taking down, that wall that you built around yourself to protect yourself. You're taking tiles off that wall and putting them to one side, letting people actually see you. And it is really scary, and it is really emotional. But to have people in your circle of friends or circle that you are involved in who will support you through that, and who are not going, that you can trust are not going to try and criticize you or tell you that you should be any different than who you are, that is where the real strength of certainly the Radiant Woman program comes into. We need that support, and the most painful thing about this is that when we begin to change, we can't look to our existing family members for support most often. Sometimes you can. Sometimes we have amazing partners or amazing parents who really just want to support us to be who we are. But oftentimes these family members that we already have a preconception about who we should be, and they won't be able to support your journey the way that you need to be supported, in the schedule that you need to be supported. And that's why the Radiant Women all over the world, the sorority is really important, to have that type of space where you will not be judged for anything that comes out, that you'll be allowed to be fully yourself. Because when we start judging each other and asking each other to live according to our values, that's when we begin to suppress those people and drive them away.
So how, given that, and it sounds like there's probably a transition period when people start getting into this work, does that mean they're alienating their family and existing friends, or can you
not necessarily
explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Not necessarily. It's just that you don't, like, if you have to alienate people from your life in order to preserve yourself, so for self-preservational reasons, then you need to do that. However, just not including, it's not even not including them. Being transparent with people that you can that you can be transparent with about the fact that you're doing work on yourself is fine. But don't expect them to be able to support it. Because if you put that expectation on them, they can't fulfill it because they don't know what the work is. So you're setting yourself up for failure.
So that would be, and would an example of that be, say, if I started doing this work and, my mother was someone who often criticised new things that I did in my life,
Yeah.
I probably would just not go to her with this, or not include her, or just...
You may not even want to tell them. It's your life. You're completely entitled as an adult to tell or not tell somebody about what you're doing. And until you find a footing in your own life, who you really are, it's premature to tell anybody who's not going to support your process about your process, because they're going to find something about it that they don't like, and they're going to tell you. And because if you don't have your footing, you're easily swayed and you might go backwards. So you will learn to have boundaries and to support yourself throughout this journey, because it is like, to anybody who has kids, you know how you want to protect your child. But what's even more amazing is when you teach that child to protect herself.
Yes.
Because you can't be there all of the time and for the rest of their lives usually to protect them. So you need to allow this for yourself as well. Allow yourself to learn to protect yourself when you need to.
Right.
This is your life.
Yeah, that's right. And in some respects it sounds a little bit isolating, but you're also talking about a support network of real people.
That's right. And it's not it's not meant to be isolating. It's actually meant to be bringing you together and closer with your family, because you're in a place where you can shine, and it gives them a permission to shine too. It's when one person in a family begins to really appreciate themselves, others can do that too, and then there is a completely different coming together. So this work is not about cutting bridges. This is about rebuilding the bridges, but you may have to move away from the bridge for a bit and then go back. So you have like a approach and retreat. Approach and retreat. So you, in a gentle and very responsible way, reintroduce yourself to the people who are in your lives already.
Right, so you're rebuilding bridges.
You're
basically.
rebuilding bridges.
Yeah,
this
in a new way.
Yeah, this work has the power to heal pretty much any relationship. If not for everybody involved, at least for you.
It sounds very empowering.
That's all it is. If it's not empowering, it's not expansive, it's not worth doing.
And so that's and it sounds quite honouring to the people involved too, especially the supportive people. It doesn't sound like you're kind of sponging off people.
No, and in fact sponging off people or trying to get people enrolled in your own victim story is not going to go down with my work at all. It's all about personal responsibility and you being responsible for you being happy and you living your own life. If you're not willing to live your own life, who will? It's like living according to somebody else's values is like when they don't pay attention to you, it's like you're a puppet that the strings have been cut off. Out of control.
There's there just seems so many levels to this. It's not just your immediate family, work relationships, friends, acquaintances. Would that be right?
This work has the power to change and build bridges between generations.
So, there's not really an end point, is there?
No, and we're never over our issues. It's very naive to think that we get over stuff and that we're over issues and we've already gone through something. There will always be, if you've ever had an issue about any specific topic, you will always have that issue. However, it will no longer, when you do this work, it will no longer run your life on a minute-to-minute basis. Because it might be conscious or subconscious running of the life on a minute-to-minute basis. But when you uncover a pattern and you realize how much it's running your life, that's when your personal transformation is only beginning. That's when you're really starting to move into your power and transform that challenge into a strength and see what gifts are underneath that and just bringing those gifts to the surface. It's quite powerful.
So then that comes back to what you were saying about the traumas and that. You can actually work through them so that, and recognise the patterns that they're instigating, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's surprising the patterns that we carry without realising, because on a psychological or intellectual level, a statement like, I am not my mother, is obvious. But when you begin to see the patterns that run your life, that are actually the patterns that your mother also has running her life, you go like,
you most people would like that.
yeah, I need to be not my mother. And trust me.
How many times have we said that? I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not my mom.
And then often we say to our partners, well, I'm not your mother, because they're projecting their own mother's behavior onto us. And that's another kettle of fish altogether.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, so why in this day and age is gender work important? Because I thought society probably thinks they've got it all covered.
Society thinks they have everything covered. I mean, there's this whole thing about, society and societal and familial conditioning telling women, especially women, what is pretty, what's in that pretty box, and anything outside of that pretty box is inappropriate or wrong. We should all just fit into that box, and when you plug your eyebrows, you fit into that box. I haven't plugged my eyebrows for years, and I have no desire to be in that box. But but seriously speaking, it's society has its own idea about how we should look and how we should behave, and a lot of that is suppressing what's called sexual polarity, which is the energy between men and women, or the masculine and the feminine, which is important for creation, for building big projects, thinking outside the box, all these kinds of things. And us trying to fit into that box and be what society defines is feminine is actually not allowing the full creation of who we are and the full power of the women that we are. But also, women feeling like they need to behave like men at work in order to be successful reduces that sexual polarity considerably these days. And also men who think that they have to be sensitive, like these new age sensitive guys, in order to be somehow more successful in relationships, is depolarizing that sexual energy. And when, as I just said, when the sexual energy or sexual polarity is depolarized or reduced, creation is nowhere nearly as glorious. Nowhere nearly as glorious. And you look at women who are stuck in their, they build their career, and they're in their 30s, and then they've been those go-getters, and they're all sorted, and they're in a good position, and then all of a sudden their biological clock goes tick, and then they want to have a child and they can't, and they have to go through IVF because they haven't practiced being in their feminine enough in order to facilitate this growth, this space in their bodies for this other new person to grow in and develop and to give birth and create that person. So it's because we don't embrace our femininity that we become gradually more and more masculine. So whatever sexual energy, feminine or masculine, you effectively nurture, the more you become of that. And women who have difficulty conceiving often are in a mind frame of getting stuff done.
Yeah.
In that masculine, let's get it done kind of a mode.
And then there's a lot of pressure on them because they can't then do this.
That's exactly right, because you have to relax into your feminine. You can't go into your feminine. You have to relax into your feminine and really allow yourself to open up, because one of the essences of the feminine is providing a space where the masculine can then come in and enter and be present in. It's
how much of what you're saying then, what am I trying to say here? How does that all relate to, there seems to be a lot of confusion these days in roles. You
Absolutely.
sort of were talking a little bit before about male and female roles and how they interact with each other and, which then, there's all this depression and anxiety and, and then I guess the follow-on from that is, substance abuse and...
Absolutely.
Escaping, needing to escape.
That's right. It's not even about if you're a woman you should just be feminine. It's not even about that. It's about knowing when you're in your feminine and knowing when you're in your masculine, and then seeing if you want to choose something else. Does that make sense? So it's not about you should be like this. It's like you be exactly how you want to be, but if you're trying to conceive a child, you might want to relax into your feminine more.
So how would a woman choose to do that?
To relax. Whatever, you need to find out what is the right way for you to relax and go and do that.
Becoming a bit more self-aware and...
Self-awareness is what it's all about, and responsible. It's the personal responsibility that I keep talking about time and time again. If you don't take personal responsibility of the results of your life so far, you won't have a chance of change, or you have a very small chance of change.
So then that would come back to what you were saying about the soul and those feelings that you get, what feels right, what's not right, what are those niggling things at you? I know for myself sometimes I've been in situations and there's not necessarily been something wrong, but there's just been this niggling.
It's not exactly right.
It's not exactly right and you can't quite put your finger on it.
Yeah, and that's when you actually start to just see, how am I feeling right now? And what would I prefer right now, or what do I need right now? So it comes back to those two questions. When you realize that something's not exactly right, you go like, hang on a second, just pause. How am I feeling? How am I feeling right now? And what do I need right now? And can I give it to myself? Because it's not, you can't always do that. There are times, if you're driving in the traffic and you're in the middle of you can't just all of a sudden pull over.
Everyone's so busy.
That's right. But as much as you can, pull yourself away from that situation, like pull yourself away from that bridge of sharing this with your immediate family in the beginning, and sort yourself out and then reapproach the situation. Because when you know what you need and you start giving it to yourself, the situation will transform, because the emotional hooks are no longer there that you used to have.
So then how do those people new to this idea and who are busy. I mean, most people these days are busy and find it hard to find time. You know, how do people find time to allow this process to happen?
Well, in the beginning, it's a lot of work. So in the beginning, it's checking in on yourself several times a day. So the people who actually need to transform for themselves will find the time. That's really the only answer. You will find the time if you really need to do this work, or if you're prepared to do it. And we don't our starting premise for the Radiant Women's International Club and the whole Radiant Women program is that we don't convince anybody to do this work. If you're not ready to do it, you're not ready. We don't work with people who are not ready. It's tedious.
So the neighbour down the road who's got the life falling apart, I don't drag her along and say, here, you need to do this.
No, you can talk to them on a one-to-one basis and see where they're at and if they're interested. Because people don't learn by words, people learn by examples and what they observe in their own life experience. So when people see that you're doing pretty well, and when they start asking questions like, what are you doing differently to me that you're doing so well, that's when you can tell them, I'm doing this kind of work. And here's information, and off you go and see if if you're interested. Because if they are actually interested in changing their lives, they will look it up. If they're not interested enough to look it up, if they need to be prompted to look it up, it's already too much work. People don't hear answers to questions they haven't asked.
No, that's very true, yes. So would you have an exercise for people who would be, listening to this, that are probably thinking, well, is this for me? Or, is what's the next step?
Well, one exercise which anybody can do at any point of their day is, so write down these two questions. How do I feel right now? And what do I need right now? And sometimes the answer is, I don't know. And that is certainly an exercise that anybody can do at any point in their lives. Another exercise that you could do to kind of start shedding light on what patterns might be running your life is look at those times in your life that you got a visceral reaction to something. So when did you have like a panic attack or anxiety attack, or you vomited spontaneously, or you couldn't breathe, or you had heart palpitations? Start taking a note of those times in your life and start seeing then what happened before that happened. Because that will give you nice bit of an overview of what triggers you into a cellular memory reaction.
Those shoulder the muscles tightening up.
When do you get the migraines? What happens? And just put it could be hormonal, but just pop that to one side for a moment and see if something else could be the cause of your migraines. The starting premise of this work is, what I believe isn't necessarily true. So you begin to not doubt yourself, but you begin to question everything you've ever believed. For example, you might go like, I have hormonal migraines. But actually it may not be hormonal. It may just be that every month when you have a specific kind of a thing that happens that time of the month might be so stressful for you that you get a stress migraine from it. It may not be hormonal at all. So be open to the fact that what you've always believed isn't necessarily true. So those are the three things, that exercise that anybody can do at any point of their life is stop, ask yourself, how am I feeling right now and what do I need right now? So that's number one. Number two is find out look at your when you got really triggered, so when you got a visceral reaction, and see what happened before that and start logging that in, so start jotting it down. This happened and I got this reaction. This happened and I got this reaction. This happened and I got this reaction. So that's number 2. And number 3 is just beginning this mantra. What I believe isn't necessarily true.
Yeah, that's a bit confronting, isn't it?
It sure is.
So I think most people probably think in most situations they're right.
Absolutely, because most people need to be right about how they perceive things, because if they think that they might be wrong, all of a sudden they feel like their whole world is out of control.
So then it's not an issue about being right and wrong.
It's just about an issue of, do you want to be happy?
So it really is, challenging how you viewed things.
Yes, that's right.
So are there any other thoughts or things that you would like to share, or like are there any things that you would like to cover?
Well, I think
it's work?
I think it's been, because it's just scratching the surface. This is just to kind of talk about why this work is important, but so I think we've covered an awful lot of material already, which is fine, and I'm happy to do that, but I don't want to go on about it. People who are interested in doing the work outside of this recording will do the work. But I'd like to just wrap up with saying, when we allow ourselves to be who we are, we give other people a permission to be who they truly are. And don't you ever dare to not be who you fully are, because the world needs you exactly how you are.
Wow. That's big.
We need you.
Well, thank you so much for your words of wisdom.
Pleasure. Anytime. Looking forward to working with you again.
Certain, for sure.